Today, the same grand jury that indicted Trump last week was spotted meeting again in D.C. Grand juries cannot continue meeting on indictments that have already been charged, so this would be something else. This would be something new. And that comes after we got this very great reporting from Betsy Woodruff Swan at Politico. On Monday, Jack Smith's prosecutors had a closed-door interview with a friend of Rudy, Bernie Kerik. And they asked Mr. Kerik multiple questions about how Trump's PAC, Save America, raised enormous amounts of money in the weeks between the election and January 6th. You may remember that Trump raised more than $250 million in the 8 weeks after the 2020 election, and he did so by running ads like this one.
America deserved an honest election. This is what they got. Suitcases of ballots added in secret in Georgia. Dead people voting in Wisconsin. A money for vote scheme in Nevada. Poll watchers denied access in Pennsylvania. Faulty ballot drop boxes, and clerks facing felony charges in Michigan. The evidence is overwhelming.
For months, well before Trump's latest indictment came out, we had seen report after report that special counsel Jack Smith was investigating Trump's use of false claims about the election to raise money. We even had reporting that Smith was particularly interested in seeing if any of that activity amounted to wire fraud. And now it looks like we have confirmation that part of Jack Smith's investigation, the part that deals with potential wire fraud, campaign finance fraud, that part is very much ongoing. The special counsel may very well not be done here. And that may be a good call on Jack Smith's part, because the former president is not done lying.
There was never a second of any day that I didn't believe that that election was rigged. It was a rigged election. It was a rigged election, and it was a stolen, disgusting election. And this country should be ashamed.
Joining us now are Politico national correspondent and MSNBC contributor Betsy Woodruff Swan and former federal prosecutor and co-host of the Prosecuting Donald Trump podcast, Andrew Weissmann. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Andrew, are we going to see a superseding indictment here, or do you think this grand jury action is about the co-conspirators who were unnamed in the initial indictment?
Well, I think that the odds of seeing a superseding indictment in the January 6th case against Donald Trump are low. And that's because it's clear that the prosecution wants that to go to trial, and they want a trial date, and they want it to be either before the election or even before the Republican nomination. But what we could see is, to your point, the co-conspirators. I think it's highly likely that some, if not all, will be indicted, but that could be in a separate case. And then on the financial piece, that also could be a separate set of charges. And that doesn't necessarily need to go all the way up to Donald Trump to bring that case. Remember, that case is very similar to the cases that we saw against Steve Bannon and his cohorts in connection with Build the Wall, which was basically just a fraud case, which is you raise money saying X when you really meant not X. And you could have the same thing. What I find really interesting, if that proceeds, is that can lead to pretrial forfeiture. We did this in the Mueller investigation. And so you could end up with that PAC with the money being frozen.
The Save America PAC.
Exactly. And what is it being used for?
Legal bills.
Exactly. Sorry. Exactly.
We take it on the road. Wait a second. I mean, that's deeply problematic, given the fact that this is effectively the piggy bank for all the defendants that are thus far towing the line for Donald Trump. This is where their lawyers, we think, are being paid from. So to have those funds frozen would have significant legal implications.
Yeah, I mean, there could be other funds that are available, but if they're funds that have been obtained by fraud, and obviously the government would have to prove that, there's a showing that needs to be made, but you can get pretrial seizure orders. We did that in the special counsel investigation. Obviously, that all requires proof. It requires a court to do that. But if this is where they're going, you can do that, and there doesn't have to be a charge against Donald Trump. It can be against the PAC itself. It could be against lower-level people and still have both civil and criminal forfeiture.
Betsy, one of the reasons we think that the grand jury is hearing evidence related to possible campaign fraud is because Bernie Kerik who we mentioned in the lead, and according to your reporting, was meeting with prosecutors on Monday. Can you tell us more about why Bernie Kerik may be the sort of Kevin Bacon of all of this, the person that connects the various spokes on the wheel?
Yeah, he's a bit of a Forrest Gump type character
Sure.
here. He and Rudy Giuliani go way, way back to their days running powerful offices within the city of New York. Bernie Kerik, of course, was the NYPD commissioner. He's been very close allies of Giuliani for decades now. And in that crazy window between Election Day 2020 and January 26th, Bernie Kerik very much worked hand in glove with Rudy Giuliani under him on that legal team that was trying to find any sort of evidence, any sort of pretext to make the case that the election had been stolen by Joe Biden. What we also know, based on a conversation that I had today with Bernie Kerik's lawyer, who was in the room with the special counsel's team for the interview that Bernie Kerik held with them earlier this week, is that Jack Smith's prosecutors were very interested in Save America, interested in who was making decisions about fundraising, and also interested in who was making decisions about how the money that the PAC raised was spent. When it comes to this fraud question, one thing people should just keep in mind, based on public reporting going back for years now, is that a real bone of contention between Rudy Giuliani and people in Trump's orbit was the fact that Rudy Giuliani actually hardly got paid during that window of time. Giuliani and his allies were pushing Trump in the month or two after Biden's inauguration to help pay Giuliani for what he had done and to pay for the exploding legal bills that Giuliani was facing. So an outstanding question is not just, were the Save America PAC fundraisers deliberately lying, potentially committing wire fraud in raising money for that entity, but also when they claimed that they were going to use that money, the money people gave very generously, these Trump small dollar donors gave in that window, when they said they were going to use that money to contest the election, what do they actually do with it? And what does that mean from the standpoint of the laws governing campaign finance?
Betsy, just really quick, I mean, from Tim Parlatore, who we've had on this program as recently as last week, is the lawyer in question here. There has not been the public suggestion that Bernie Kerik is going to be giving shall we say, damning evidence to the prosecution, but it sort of sounds like he might.
That's right. I'm not aware of any indicators that Bernie Kerik's testimony was the sort of discussion that would have gotten Rudy Giuliani in trouble. But he's important, of course, because he just knows so much. When it comes to the question of filling in factual gaps, having somebody who was in the room for conversations, having someone who can explain all the minor characters who played important but perhaps underestimated roles in the machinations that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell were involved in, Kerik himself provides that valuable insight. He is not indicated in Trump's indictment as an unindicted co-conspirator, but without a doubt, he was very close and had detailed knowledge of the activities of Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, is one of those unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators in the indictment.